1925, Zacatecas. Dust hangs amber in the boiler light, air thick with molasses and coal smoke. Stacked lunch pails rest by size on a fence post where no worker left them. Footprints lead toward the crusher house and stop at clean stone. If the boy never entered the mill floor, who wrote the note in the ledger for next Thursday? The Esperanza mill stands 3 kilometers west of the plaza in a fold of dry hills where scrub cedar crowds the road. Rails run east to the warehouses. Water comes down wooden flumes from a spring no one can locate on any map. The mill breathes through valves that wheeze and settle all night. 70 men work the crushers and the clarifier vats. The stone foundation shows mason marks from 1870. Locals say the ground beneath the boiler room never freezes even when frost coats the cane fields at dawn. Steam rises through grates in the yard. Dogs avoid the fence line after dark. Wednesday morning, the foreman receives a sealed envelope brought by a schoolboy from town. The boy wears short trousers and a white shirt with ink on the cuff. He hands over the note and asks to see the pressure gauges because his teacher mentioned them. The foreman points through the open door. The boy steps inside. 2 workers unloading cane sacks turn their backs for a moment to hoist a load. When they glance back, the boy is gone. The foreman walks through the crusher room calling out. No answer comes. The door to the clarifier hall stands closed. The furnace door is latched. The gauges read 112 pounds. They have read 112 since sunrise and will not move. By noon, the boy's father arrives on a borrowed mule. He is a clerk at the municipal office. His son left home at 7:30 with the envelope. The walk to the mill takes 40 minutes. The father checks the road both ways. He questions every worker on shift. No one saw the boy leave. The foreman shows him the maintenance ledger kept on a shelf by the coal bin. The last entry is dated the previous Tuesday in the mill operator's slanted script. Below that line, someone has written in careful block letters a note about replacing a valve gasket. The date reads, next Thursday. The handwriting matches the boy's school assignments, which the father pulls from his jacket. The ink is still faintly damp. 3 lunch pails appear stacked by height on the fence post nearest the main gate. The bottom pail belongs to a man named Ruiz who ate his meal an hour earlier and left the empty tin in the wash shed. The middle pail carries the initials of a worker who called in sick that morning. The top pail has no markings. The lids catch the afternoon light in sequence like mirrors. No one admits to stacking them. The foreman takes them down and places them in a wooden crate. Footprints in the dust near the crusher intake show the boy's size and tread. They lead from the threshold toward the belt housing. 5 prints. Then smooth stone, not swept, not scuffed. The dust on either side lies undisturbed. One of the workers crouches and runs his fingers along the ground. He finds a gear tooth the length of his thumb lying bright on the flagstones. The tooth is new. No teeth are missing from any visible gear. The foreman turns it over. The metal shows no wear. He wraps it in cloth and sets it beside the lunch pails. The father walks the perimeter calling his son's name. The mill yard covers 2 hectares. Stacks of cut cane lean against the outer wall. The clarifier building stands separate from the main structure with a covered walkway between. Inside the clarifier hall, enormous copper vats bubble with syrup. Wooden paddles stir the liquid. The air smells of burnt sugar and lime. Workers check the vats with long hooks. Nothing rises but foam. The father climbs the ladder to the catwalk above the vats. The metal is hot under his palms. He looks down into the amber surfaces. Steam obscures his view. He descends and checks the coal room. Sacks are stacked to the ceiling. He moves several aside. The space behind is empty. At dusk, the father returns to town and reports the disappearance to the alcalde. A telegraph is sent to the district office. By Thursday morning, a sergeant and 2 officers arrive on horseback. They interview the workers again. Stories align. The boy entered. The boy did not leave. The sergeant examines the gauges. He taps the glass. The needles remain fixed. He asks if they are broken. The foreman says they worked fine on Tuesday. He cannot explain why they froze. The officers search the crusher mechanism. The rollers are clean. The belt shows no tears. They open the furnace and rake through the ash. Nothing but coal residue and clinker comes up. Thursday afternoon, the local priest arrives with a group of women from the parish. They walk through the buildings with candles. They pray in the clarifier hall. One woman faints near the coal bin. She revives and says the air turned cold. Others feel nothing. The priest blesses the machinery and the yard. He asks the foreman if anyone has died at the mill. The foreman recalls a worker who fell from the catwalk in 1918. The man survived with broken ribs. No deaths on record. The priest nods and leaves. By Friday, the story spreads through Zacatecas. Farmers bring lanterns and help search the hills around the mill. They comb the cedar thickets. They check the ravine below the flume. They find nothing. A group of boys from the missing child's school walk the rail line to the warehouses. They discover a scrap of white cloth snagged on a thorn bush 200 meters east of the mill. The cloth matches the boy's shirt. The thorn bush grows alone on flat ground with no other vegetation nearby. The father examines the scrap. He weeps. The sergeant takes the cloth as evidence. Saturday morning, the father returns home to gather fresh clothes. He finds his son's jacket hanging on a peg in the narrow hallway. He checks the pockets as he has done a dozen times. This time, his fingers touch paper. He pulls out a ticket stub for the Saturday market lottery. The stub is punched with that day's date. The drawing has not yet occurred. The father stares at the paper. He left the house on Wednesday. No one has been inside since. His wife is staying with her sister. He locks the door and rides back to the mill with the stub in his fist. The sergeant examines the ticket. The punch mark is clean. The ink is fresh. The date is clear. He has no explanation. He asks if anyone could have entered the house. The father insists the door remained locked. The sergeant places the stub with the other evidence. By now, the story has reached the newspapers. A reporter from the capital arrives on the evening train. He interviews the workers. He photographs the mill. He requests to see the ledger. The foreman shows him the entry. The reporter writes furiously in his notebook. His article runs on Monday under the headline, "Ghost Mill Boy Writes from Beyond." Sunday, the bell above the furnace building rings 11 times at 3 in the morning. The night shift stops working. The bell is operated by a rope inside the foreman's office. The door is locked. The foreman lives in a house behind the mill and comes running with his key. He unlocks the door. The office is empty. The rope hangs still. He counts the rings later with the workers. 11. No shift begins at 3. The standard signals are 3 rings for start, 2 for break, 1 for emergency. 11 has no meaning. One of the older workers says his grandfather spoke of a mine north of the city where a bell rang by itself before a collapse. No one knows if the story is true. Monday, the father stops eating. He sits in the yard outside the main gate. His brother brings him water. The priest visits again and prays with him. The sergeant organizes a formal search party. 20 men arrive with ropes and tools. They dismantle sections of the crusher housing. They inspect every joint and seam. They drain a section of the clarifier to examine the piping below. They find sediment and rust and nothing else. The gauges still read 112. A mechanic from the district tries to adjust them. The mechanism does not respond. He suggests replacing both units. The foreman refuses until the search concludes. Tuesday, a woman from a village south of Zacatecas comes forward. She claims her son vanished from a workshop 3 years earlier. He was apprenticed to a carpenter. One afternoon, he went to fetch a tool from the back room and did not return. The room had no other exit. Searchers found nothing. The case was never solved. She asks if the mill was operating in 1922. The foreman confirms it was. She asks if anything strange occurred that year. He recalls a week when the furnace burned hotter than normal despite reduced coal. The temperature climbed without explanation. Engineers could not find the cause. The anomaly ended as suddenly as it began. Wednesday, the alcalde suspends operations at the mill pending investigation. The workers are sent home with partial pay. The machinery falls silent. The father remains in the yard. His brother sets up a canvas shelter and stays with him. At night, they hear the valves settling. The steam continues to rise. Thursday, the reporter returns with a photographer. They document the empty buildings. The photographer sets up his camera to capture the lunch pails. The image comes out overexposed. White light obscures the center of the frame. He tries again with a different plate. The same result. He blames his equipment and leaves. Friday, a surveyor arrives from the territorial office. He has been asked to map the mill property. He sets up his transit and measures angles. His readings do not align with the existing plat. He rechecks his instruments. The numbers remain inconsistent. He sketches the layout by hand. On paper, the buildings appear to overlap in ways that do not match what he sees. He mentions the discrepancy to the sergeant. The sergeant does not understand. The surveyor tries to explain. If the measurements are correct, the crusher building occupies space already taken by the clarifier hall. They stand 15 meters apart. The math makes no sense. He abandons the survey and files an incomplete report. Saturday, the mill remains closed. The father finally agrees to return home. His brother helps him onto the mule. They ride east toward town. At the plaza, they encounter a group of workers from the mill. One of them mentions that the gauges dropped overnight. Both now read 0. The father turns the mule around. He rides back to the mill. The foreman meets him at the gate. It is true. The pressure released all at once around dawn. No one was inside. The valves opened by themselves. The foreman heard the hiss from his house. He came running. The buildings were empty. The gauges now rest at 0. The father asks what it means. The foreman does not answer. Sunday, the priest conducts a mass in the yard. 50 people attend. The father kneels in the dust. The priest speaks of mysteries beyond understanding. He urges faith and patience. After the service, the father approaches the lunch pail still sitting in the wooden crate. He lifts the top pail. It is warm. He sets it down quickly. The foreman touches it. The metal is hot enough to sting. The other pails are cool. The foreman wraps the top pail in a rag and places it back in the crate. That night, the bell rings 11 times again. No one goes to investigate. Monday, a scholar from the university arrives to examine the ledger. He is an expert in documents and forgery. He studies the entry under lamplight. The handwriting is genuine. The ink is standard. The paper matches the rest of the ledger. He can find no evidence of tampering. The entry was written after the boy disappeared. He cannot explain how. He suggests the boy may have written it earlier without anyone noticing. The foreman insists the ledger was checked daily. The scholar takes samples of the paper and ink for laboratory analysis. He leaves with more questions than answers. Tuesday, the district engineer returns with 2 assistants. They spend 3 days examining the steam system. They map every pipe and valve. They test the pressure in different sections. The system appears functional. The gauges now respond normally. The engineer writes in his report that the freeze may have been caused by mineral deposits blocking the mechanism. He recommends a full cleaning. The foreman reads the report and says nothing. He knows the gauges were serviced 2 weeks before the disappearance. By the second week, theories circulate through Zacatecas. Some say the boy ran away and the strange events are coincidence. Others point out that the boy was a diligent student with no reason to flee. His teacher describes him as quiet and responsible. His mother shows neighbors his schoolwork. Every page is neat. Some believe the boy fell into machinery that was later cleaned unknowingly. The sergeant rejects this. The crusher was inspected within an hour. The clarifier vats were checked. The furnace was cold that morning. A farmer suggests the boy may have hidden in a cane wagon and been transported to the warehouses. Search parties comb the warehouses for a second time. They find rats and mold and stacked barrels. The boy is not there. A woman in the market claims she saw him walking toward the hills on Thursday. Her account does not match the timeline. She is elderly and confused. Her daughter apologizes for wasting the sergeant's time. Others speak of natural explanations that stretch reason. An old worker mentions gases that sometimes collect in mills. He says a boy could faint and be carried off by someone in confusion. No one admits to carrying anyone. The doctor who examined the buildings found no dangerous gases. A merchant suggests coyotes or wildcats. The mill is surrounded by open ground. No animal tracks were found. No blood. No struggle. A few whisper about the land itself. The hills around Zacatecas are honeycombed with old mines from the colonial period. Some shafts were never mapped. A miner from the northern district recalls a collapse in 1910 where 3 men vanished. Their bodies were never recovered. Locals believed the men fell into a cavity that led deeper than anyone knew. The sergeant asks if such a cavity could exist under the mill. The miner shrugs. The ground is limestone. Water carves channels over centuries. Anything is possible. The priest hears confessions from workers who fear the mill is cursed. One man says he felt watched near the coal bin. Another describes a coldness in the clarifier hall that moved like a living thing. The priest reminds them that fear creates phantoms. He does not mention his own unease when he blessed the buildings. The air near the crusher felt wrong to him. Not cold, not hot. Simply wrong. He prays for the boy each night. By the 3rd week, the father grows thin. His brother brings him broth. The canvas shelter leaks when it rains. The brother urges him to come home. The father refuses. He believes his son is still at the mill. Somewhere, hidden or trapped or waiting. He walks the yard at all hours. He taps on the walls. He listens at the grates. He hears only the wind. A telegraph arrives from the capital. The laboratory has analyzed the ink from the ledger. The composition is consistent with standard ink used in 1925. The paper fibers match the ledger stock. The handwriting matches the boy's confirmed samples. The entry is genuine. The date remains impossible. The scholar writes that he has consulted colleagues in Mexico City and Barcelona. None can offer an explanation. He suggests the matter be referred to the National Academy. The sergeant files the telegraph with the other documents. Thursday of the 3rd week, a crew arrives to reopen the mill. The alcalde has decided that production must resume. The workers return reluctantly. They gather in the yard before dawn. The foreman unlocks the buildings. The father watches from his shelter. The crew enters the crusher house. They light the furnace. They load cane into the hoppers. The machinery starts with a grinding roar. By mid-morning, the first batch of syrup flows into the clarifier vats. Everything functions normally. At noon, the father hears a sound, a tapping, rhythmic and faint. He stands and tilts his head. The sound comes from the direction of the crusher building. He walks across the yard. The workers are on break. The machinery runs unattended. He enters through the main door. The tapping continues. He follows it to the coal bin. The sound seems to come from inside the wall. He presses his ear against the stone. The tapping stops. He waits. It does not resume. That afternoon, the foreman receives a letter. It arrives by post from the municipal office. The envelope is addressed in block letters. Inside is a single sheet. The handwriting matches the ledger entry. The letter contains 3 sentences. The first describes the view from a window the boy could not have seen. The window faces the hills to the west. The boy never went upstairs. The second sentence mentions a bird with a broken wing resting on the sill. No one recalls seeing such a bird. The third sentence reads, "I am still here." The foreman shows the letter to the sergeant. The sergeant examines the postmark. It was mailed on Tuesday from the central office in town. The clerk at the office swears no child delivered it. The letter appeared in the outgoing pile. No one saw it placed there. The sergeant questions the postal workers. They know nothing. He takes the letter as evidence. That night he sits in his office and reads the 3 sentences until the lamp runs low. Friday, the father receives permission to search the buildings one final time. He brings his brother and 2 men from the parish. They carry lanterns and ropes. They start in the crusher house and work through every room. They check the ceiling joists. They examine the floorboards. They find nothing. In the clarifier hall, they discover a loose panel in the wall near the catwalk. Behind the panel is a narrow space barely wide enough for a child. The space is empty. Scratches mark the wood inside. Fresh scratches. The brother runs his finger along them. The marks are shallow and deliberate. They form letters. 3 words. I am here. The father collapses. His brother and the men carry him outside. The doctor is summoned. He examines the father and prescribes rest. The father refuses to leave. The sergeant arrives and views the scratches. He measures the space. A child could fit inside. but the panel shows no signs of recent removal. The wood has swollen with age. It would require tools to pry it open. The marks inside are unexplained. The sergeant seals the panel and posts a guard. Saturday, a second surveyor attempts to map the property. He works carefully and double-checks every measurement. His results match the first surveyor's report. The buildings overlap on paper. He draws two versions. One shows what he sees. One shows what the instruments record. The difference is small but consistent. Less than a meter, but it exists. He submits both drawings to the territorial office with a note requesting review by a senior engineer. The note is filed and forgotten. Sunday, the mill closes again. The workers refuse to continue. 3 men quit outright. The foreman pleads with the alcalde. The alcalde has no solution. Production at the mill ceases. The machinery sits idle. Steam no longer rises. The valves remain silent. The father keeps his vigil. By now he is a fixture. People bring him food. Children stare as they pass. Some leave flowers by the gate. Monday, the reporter publishes a follow-up article. He details the letter and the scratches. He includes testimony from workers about the bell and the gauges. He describes the contradictions in the timeline. He offers no conclusions. The article is reprinted in papers across the country. Letters arrive at the municipal office. Some offer theories. Some offer prayers. One letter from a professor in Guanajuato mentions similar cases. A girl who vanished from a chapel in 1896. A miner who disappeared from a sealed tunnel in 1900. Both cases involved objects found out of place and time. The professor has no explanation. He asks permission to visit Zacatecas. The alcalde does not respond. By the 4th week, the father grows delirious. His brother finds him talking to the walls. The doctor insists he be taken home. The brother enlists help. They carry the father onto a wagon. He thrashes and shouts. He calls his son's name. They take him to the house in town. His wife cares for him. He sleeps for 2 days. When he wakes, he asks for the lunch pails. His wife does not understand. He describes the 3 pails stacked by size. He says they hold the answer. No one believes him. Wednesday, the foreman goes to the wooden crate where the evidence is kept. He lifts out the 3 lunch pails. They are stacked as before. He sets them on the ground. The bottom pail belongs to Ruiz. The middle pail carries the initials. The top pail remains unmarked. He opens the top pail. Inside, he finds a folded paper. The paper is new. He unfolds it carefully. The paper contains a drawing. A child's drawing. The image shows the mill from above. The buildings are arranged in a pattern that does not match reality. The crusher and the clarifier overlap. Between them is a space marked with an X. The foreman takes the drawing to the sergeant. The sergeant compares it to the surveyor's reports. The overlap matches. The X is positioned where the measurements conflict. The sergeant returns to the mill with the foreman and 6 men. They bring picks and shovels. They begin digging at the spot marked by the X. The ground is hard. They work for hours. At 2 meters, they strike stone. At 3 meters, the stone gives way. A cavity opens beneath. Cold air rises from the gap. They lower a lamp. The light reveals a chamber carved from limestone. The chamber extends in directions the lamp cannot reach. On the floor of the chamber, they see objects: rusted tools, broken pottery, a boot with the leather rotted through. Nothing recent. Nothing that explains a boy from 1925. The sergeant climbs down on a rope. He examines the chamber floor. He finds bones, old bones, animal mostly. He sees a piece of fabric wedged in a crack. He pulls it free. The fabric is white cotton, new. He wraps it in cloth and climbs back up. The foreman looks at the scrap. It matches the piece found on the thorn bush. The sergeant orders the hole covered. He posts guards. He sends a telegraph to the capital requesting specialists. They do not come. Thursday, the father learns of the chamber. He rides to the mill against his wife's wishes. He demands to descend into the cavity. The sergeant refuses. The father becomes violent. His brother restrains him. The father weeps. He asks if his son is below. The sergeant says they found no body. Only fabric. Only old bones. The father asks what the chamber is. The sergeant has no answer. The foreman suggests it may be a colonial mine or a natural sinkhole. The surveyor's drawings suggest something else, a space that exists between measurements, a place that appears on instruments but not to the eye, or the reverse. Friday, a geologist from the university arrives. He studies the cavity. He takes samples of the rock. He measures the depth and shape. He describes the formation as anomalous. The chamber should not exist at that location. The limestone layers do not align with the regional pattern. He finds no evidence of excavation. The walls are smooth. Natural water erosion typically leaves rougher surfaces. He cannot explain how the fabric entered the chamber if no one descended. He suggests the cavity may connect to a larger system. He recommends further exploration. The alcalde refuses to fund it. Saturday, the mill property is sold. The new owner is a businessman from Monterrey who knows nothing of the case. He plans to modernize the operation. He hires a new crew. The old workers do not return. The father is barred from the grounds. He stands beyond the gate and watches the buildings. The new crew clears debris and repairs damage. They do not mention the boy. They do not ask about the chamber. The hole has been filled and graded over. Only the foreman remembers the exact location. Sunday, the father receives a package. It arrives without return address. Inside is a lunch pail. The top pail, unmarked. The father opens it. Inside, he finds a note written in his son's hand. The note reads, "I am where the numbers cross." The father does not understand. He shows the note to his wife. She weeps. He shows it to the sergeant. The sergeant examines the paper. The ink is fresh. The handwriting is genuine. He has no explanation. He adds the note to the file. The file is sealed and sent to the archives in the capital. By summer, the story fades from newspapers. Other tragedies claim attention. A flood in Veracruz. A factory fire in Puebla. The case of the mill boy becomes a footnote. Occasionally, a journalist revisits the story. Occasionally, a curious traveler asks questions in Zacatecas. No new evidence emerges. The father stops searching. He returns to his work at the municipal office. He does not speak of his son. His wife lights a candle each evening. Years pass. The mill operates under new management. The machinery is replaced. The buildings are painted. The old stories are forgotten. Workers who remember the boy grow old and die. The lunch pails are lost. The ledger is misplaced. The file in the capital gathers dust. Only the chamber remains, beneath the packed earth, in the space where measurements do not agree, where time bends in ways that defy instruments, where a boy might still be writing notes in careful block letters, where 11 bells ring when no shift begins, where footprints start and do not end, where something patient as a metronome taps against stone and waits for an answer that will not come. If the boy entered a space that exists between what is seen and what is measured, where would you search? And with what tools could you trust the results? Subscribe so you don't miss the next story.